Hi, this is Zach with Worn & Wound. Today I'll be taking a look at the Gerlach Otago. This is the first time we've had a chance to review the watch that we've spoken, or this brand, though we've spoken about them before on Worn & Wound, and they are a very interesting, unique brand. They're one of only a couple Polish manufacturers of watches out there, and they specifically are interested in kind of reinvigorating the Polish manufacturing scene, if you will. It's one that I think worldwide you don't really think about in terms of high-end manufacturing, especially in the case of watches. And they're, what's also particularly interesting about the way they're going about it is that they're doing watches with specific historical themes, and they're sticking to kind of a very affordable price point. So this watch, which is called the Otago, is dedicated to Joseph Conrad, the author, who wrote Heart of Darkness, and he was actually Polish-born. He changed his name to Conrad later in life, and his ship was named the Otago. He was around in the late 1800s, so this watch, which clearly has a very 1970s design, is attributed in name only. But then the watch itself, like I said, very 70s, and has distinct kind of influences from brands like Doxa, and it's a very kind of interesting, cool watch. The price of it is 1,169 Polish zloty, which is around $360 US, last I checked. And for that, you're getting, it's kind of well-built 200-meter diver with a sapphire crystal and a Seagull ST2551 automatic movement. So let's take a closer look now. The case design of the Otago speaks very clearly to divers of the 1970s. So it has this barrel-shaped design, which means it doesn't really have pronounced lugs. It's just kind of this long, flowing, kind of oblong shape. And it has a very massive look to it, and frankly, it is quite a large watch, but the dimensions aren't too outlandish. So from side to side here, it's 42 millimeters. From kind of edge to edge this way, it is 50 millimeters. Looking at the side, it's quite tall, at 15 millimeters here. You can see a lot of that is the bezel. And then it features a 22 millimeter, strap here. So the design overall, is kind of very simple. It's this kind of pebble-shaped, barrel-shaped, central case that has kind of a nice, actually, satin brushing on it. When you look at it on the side, you can see it's kind of a very simple form. It's really just kind of a slab of metal that goes one direction through, and there's nothing really fussy about it. And I think it kind of really does achieve that kind of barrel-shaped aesthetic that they're clearly going for here. The bezel of the watch is really kind of bold and chunky. It has a kind of an interesting tooth design, so it's kind of saw-toothed in that they're slanted on one side and straight on the other. This makes it actually very nice to grip. The bezel itself, though, I'm not in love with the feeling of the mechanism here, so it's not going anywhere. There's a tiny bit of wiggle, and when you turn it, it's fairly snappy, but there's kind of like a crunchiness to it. It feels a little bit like you're grinding something, though effectively it's actually not in the way. It's not bad. It just isn't really as pleasant feeling as something with a sharp snap. I also, and I'm not sure, it doesn't confirm this on the website, you are able to turn it both ways, and I'm not sure if that is intentional or if it's just quite easy to turn both ways. But as you can tell from the sound, it is quite grindy. Nevertheless, like I said, staying put when you're not turning it. The crown here is also quite massive. This is a 9 millimeter crown that's 5 millimeters long. I think the design is actually pretty cool. Usually you see a lot of little slots on a crown, but here it's just a couple of big chunks that are taken out, and you can really, it just really kind of bites into your finger there. It is screwed down, as you imagine, and it's quite stiff. It's really nice, build quality there. I mean, overall, everything has a very decent solidness to it. Flipping the watch over now, you can see probably one of the nicest details of the watch, which is this etching on the case back, and that is of the Joseph Conrad's Otago. He was the captain of this ship, I believe, before he was kind of a known author. It's really nice, and this is not really something you see often on watches in this price range. I think way too many people kind of skip the case back, and Gerlach definitely uses it as a canvas to kind of display the history that they're trying to get across about Poland, and it's a wonderful detail. Definitely adds value to the watch. The dial of the Otago continues the kind of 70s theme, and it is really quite close to some models of Doxas from the 70s. And Doxa was, of course, kind of the originator of the orange dialed diver. So when you see this, you kind of know that that's what they're referring to. The execution of this is quite nice, and it's definitely interesting and, quite different than anything new that's coming out these days. So there's this one main kind of index here of large applied markers, and these are steel rectangles, each with a loom filling on them. Between them are little, not applied, but just white lines for individual minutes and seconds. So legibility on this is actually quite good because it's just very bold. As you can see here, the central area is an orange, but it's not like a flat orange. It actually has a bit of a metallic quality to it. So sometimes it actually looks a bit copper, which is nice. It's a little bit different. I think orange dials alone, they're not really quite for everyone, but I like that they did something a little different here. There is a graphite version, or a kind of a dark gray version, which is obviously more low-key than this. At 3 o'clock, you have a date window. The date is presented in white text on a black disc. They did a nice kind of job here, kind of keeping the symmetry, so that equals kind of that window plus the marker there equals that other side. So it has a very even flow. And the cross marks, actually it's a very nice kind of symmetrical dial that is, I like that, and I think they achieved that quite well. The index here on the bezel is a bit strange. So as you can see, it's filled in white, and that is all loom, and it has these kind of big square markers and this kind of railroad thing going here, and then each of these little filled areas then has a digit in them. But it's actually kind of interesting when you get really close. You can see how the filling of the loom is almost about to come over them. So there's kind of an interesting molded plastic look. I'm not really sure if I'd call that an intentional detail. It might be kind of a little bit of just not the greatest manufacturing, but it's part of kind of the 70s aesthetic of it at the same time. There's something kind of raw about it. The hands here are then these kind of simple, pointer hands with black outlines, and the second hand is this very long, tapering white hand. The loom on this watch is mediocre. It charges, kind of anything that is white charges, but it isn't particularly bright or long-lasting. One of the other kind of different aspects of the G. Gerlach watches is that they use Siegel automatic movements. So this has an ST2551 movement in it. As I say, it's an automatic. It has 25 joules, a frequency of 21,600 beats per hour. So as you can see, the second hand here has a little bit of a stammer to it. That is to say, it's not as smooth as like an ETA 2024 or a Miyota 9015, though that does not actually affect the accuracy. It's just something that's noticeable. There's also a date complication, clearly. And then it functions, like any other movement. It is hand windable when the crown is unscrewed. Pulling it out one stop, you can change the date by turning it counterclockwise. Pulling it out 2 stops, it has hacking seconds, and obviously you can adjust the time there. In our time with the watch, there was absolutely no issues with power reserve or timekeeping. Actually, the watch, this movement, I believe, has 48 hours of power reserve, making it slightly larger than its Japanese and Swiss, counterparts. On the wrist, the Gerlach, it's a bit deceptive. Like I said, it looks very big, and it is a chunky watch, but the dimensions of it make it actually decently wearable. So, at 42 millimeters and with the barrel shape, you don't really, appearance-wise, at least feel like you're wearing a very large watch. I have a 7-inch wrist. I think this fits me pretty nicely. The height being, probably the most kind of, concerning thing, but, I've worn plenty of 15 millimeter watches, and it is a big diver that's part of the look. As far as the aesthetic goes, pure 70s. The orange dial is pretty bizarre. It's not necessarily, it's funny, there's some like retro vintage styles of watches that really translate into kind of modern and contemporary design. I don't know if bright orange dials are really one of them, but it definitely feels like a relic of the past, and I think that is what they were going for. But yeah, it's fun, it's bold, and it's retro. It comes on this 2 millimeter black leather strap that further emphasizes the orange clearly by having orange stitching here. It's a decent quality strap. It's what you'd expect on kind of any diver in this price range. I kind of like that it actually has this blunt end to it. I feel like that's a little bit different. But overall, it's totally decent. And it is actually also made in Poland. Like, they didn't order this part in and then, just slap it together. So they were being thorough in those regards. Wrapping up, the Gerlach Otago, it's a very interesting watch from an interesting brand. I think perhaps the most interesting thing about it is that they're doing different things and that they're achieving kind of this level of execution in a country that you don't normally expect it from, and that the price point is then, it makes it just kind of a fun, potentially frivolous watch to purchase. I think the design of it being very, 70s influence might be limiting to some, but that's clearly, it's clearly exactly what they were going for, and I think it's well executed aesthetically for what it is. If the orange dial doesn't do it for you, but you like the kind of 70s chunky diver look, there is the graphite version that I mentioned before. And for the price of, in the $360 range, that probably fluctuates, I think it is a pretty good value. It's a funny thing, it's a sapphire crystal watch with an automatic movement, so that could cost obviously many dollars more, but this features a Chinese movement, which then is definitely going to lower the overall value, but having it made in Poland is very interesting. So there's just a lot going on, and I think if you like it, you'll really enjoy it. This one's also a limited edition of 250, which just adds that kind of interesting factor to it as well. So please read the full review on Worn and Wound and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Tumblr. Thank you.